The content on the Untold Tales channel is protected by copyright. Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. Ashes of the past. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my heart pounding. The only sound in my head was Emily's voice. She was crying, gasping for air in fear, begging me to come. Dad, I'm in the park. I'm scared, she sobbed. Emily, sweetheart, I'm already on my way. Stay put. I'll be there soon. The city park was deserted at this hour. I found her curled up in the bushes, shaking. Her face was bruised, her clothes torn. I felt cold fury seeping into every cell of my body. Who did this? I asked quietly, kneeling in front of her. Home, she sniffled. I came home. Mom was drunk. And Henry, he was there. He was waiting for me. I clenched my jaw. Did he touch you? Emily nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I fought back. He hit me. But I grabbed a statuette and I hit him, and I managed to escape. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing the red haze out of my vision. You did the right thing, sweetheart. Now let's go home. She trembled the whole way back, and I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I closed the door behind me, the air was thick with the stench of cheap wine mixed with something sickly sweet. In the living room, sprawled on the couch, sat Samantha. Her eyes were glassy, lips trembling, a half-empty glass of wine dangling from her fingers. Oh, there you are, she exhaled, tilting her head slightly. Thought you wouldn't come. I didn't answer. I just stood there, looking at the woman who used to be my wife. But the thing in front of me was just a shadow, a twisted, pathetic echo of the Samantha I once built a family with. Where's Henry? My voice was ice. She laughed a hollow, ugly sound. Oh, Henry. So, you know about him now, huh? She slurred, swaying slightly as she looked at me from under her lashes. And so what? He's better than you, David. So much better. I felt something twist inside me, but I didn't let it show. And Emily? She came home, and you were like this. Samantha wrinkled her nose as if I had reminded her of something unpleasant. That little brat. She waved a hand, spilling wine onto the carpet. She's exhausting. Always whining, always sticking her nose where it doesn't belong. Thinks she's so perfect. I stepped closer. You let that bastard lay a hand on her? Samantha narrowed her eyes, curling her lips into a sneer. So what? Maybe he could have taught her some manners. She raised her glass, as if to toast with some invisible companion. And you too, David. You were always so dull, so righteous. I needed something alive. I clenched my fists. You let him touch our daughter. She just scoffed. Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic. He wouldn't have done anything serious to her. She just needs to understand how the world works. I closed my eyes for a moment, forcing down the rising storm inside me. You will never go near Emily again, I breathed. Never. Samantha threw her head back and cackled. Oh, please. And what are you going to do? Throw me out? Be my guest. I looked at her one last time, searching for even a shred of humanity in this husk of a woman. But there was nothing. Just a void. You're already dead to me, Samantha, I said quietly and slapped her across the face. And to her too. I left Emily at my sister Rachel's, promising her I'd be back soon. She tried to say something, but I just kissed her forehead and squeezed her hand. You're safe, sweetheart. I'll take care of this. I shut the door behind me and stepped into the night. Henry was a mistake. A mistake that someone had dared to bring into my life, but I was going to correct it. I knew where to find him. That filth always crawled back to the same Holia warehouse outside the city, where he conducted his business with scum just like him. Guns, drugs, dirty cops. I didn't care. I was driven by one thing, rage. When I pulled up, the building was bathed in the weak glow of streetlights. Two men stood at the entrance, smoking typical thugs, dressed in black, jackets bulging where their holsters sat underneath. I stepped out of the car and walked toward them without hesitation. One of them squinted at me, exhaling a cloud of smoke. Hey, buddy, you lost. I struck his throat before he could finish. A sharp, brutal movement, his windpipe collapsed, and he crumpled to his knees, gasping for air. The second one reached for his gun, but I was already on him. I grabbed his wrist, twisted it hard enough to snap the bone. He screamed, but not for long. A fist to his face shut him up. I didn't let him fall, grabbed his head, and twisted sharply. The first one was still writhing on the ground, choking, clawing at his throat, trying to force in a breath. I stomped down on his face with my boot. That's for my daughter, you piece of shit. A crunch. Then silence. I picked up a gun from the ground. Time to go inside. I pushed open the heavy door and stepped into the warehouse's dark interior. The air smelled of oil, metal, and sweat. A dim light flickered in the corner. A step. Another step. Then, suddenly, darkness crashed down on me. Something struck the back of my head with brutal force. The world spun. Hands grabbed me, wrenched my arms back. Metal cuffs snapped around my wrists. Well, you really are bold, David, a greasy voice sneered. Just stupid. The world was still tilting, but I already knew whose voice it was. Henry. They dragged me toward the light. He stood in front of me, smirking, a pistol dangling from his fingers. So, hero, you thought you'd just waltz in here and settle things? He crouched in front of me, tilting his head. Didn't your ex tell you? I don't like people messing with my plans. I spit in his face. He wiped it off silently, then swung his fist and cracked me across the jaw. My head snapped to the side, my mouth filled with blood. I just smiled. You're finished, Henry. He grinned again. We'll see who's finished, David. My head throbbed from the impact, my lips swollen from the hit, but it was nothing compared to what he said next. You know, David, he squatted beside me, lighting a cigar. I've been watching you for a long time. You think you came for me? No, pal. This was decided before you even left your house. I stared at him, hiding the cold, creeping fury building inside me. You were good, David. Once. Henry blew a thick cloud of smoke into my face. Your reputation, damn, you were a legend. A killer that no one could trace. A professional who pulled off the kind of job others wouldn't even dare attempt. He grinned. Remember that operation? The one that bought you your freedom? Of course you do. I found out everything. I clenched my teeth. That chapter of my life was closed. But not for him. I could just kill you, but I need you. He stood up and waved a hand. One of his men handed him a phone. He turned the screen toward me. Emily. She was sitting on the dirty floor of a dark room. Her hands were tied, her lips sealed shut with tape. Her eyes. God, her eyes were filled with terror. If you want to see her alive, you'll have to do something for me, David. I lifted my head. I'm going to kill you, Henry. He burst into laughter. Maybe, but not before you finish the job. I clenched my fists, the handcuffs digging into my skin. Who? Now we're talking, Henry drawled with satisfaction. There's a man interfering with my business. Name's Vic Morello. He's gotten too bold, sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. I'd take care of him myself, but you know how these things work. Some people are just too well protected. I knew that name. Vic Morello was a real piece of work, the head of one of the most ruthless gangs controlling drug trafficking and arms smuggling. Plenty had tried to take him out, and every single one of them had disappeared. Morello isn't some street thug, Henry continued. He's smart, careful, well-guarded. But you, David, you're not just any killer, are you? I remained silent. You have 2 days, Henry patted me on the shoulder. If Morello isn't dead by then. He nodded toward the phone. Her head arrives in a box. The veins in my hands bulged. If you so much as touch her. Oh, I won't, Henry smirked. As long as you do your job right. He stood up and gestured to his men. Let him go. Let him get to work. The handcuffs were removed, and I rose to my feet. Hatred churned in my chest. Remember, David, Henry gave me a wink. You've got 2 days. Don't screw this up. They threw me out onto the street like a sack of garbage. I landed on one knee, straightened, and glanced back. The warehouse door had already slammed shut, and from the rooftop, one of Henry's men was watching me, smirking through a cloud of cigarette smoke. I spat blood onto the asphalt and headed for my car. My mind held no doubts, no Fahrenheit calculation. 2 days. Morello was a tough target, but not for me. I started the engine and rolled through the city under the cover of night. I knew where to look for information. Morello had his own network, his informants in bars, his dealers on the streets. But before I could even begin, something caught my eye. A black sedan. It moved slowly, trailing me in the rearview mirror for 3 blocks already. I smirked. Henry, you really think it's that easy? I turned into a narrow alley, killed the headlights, and slammed on the brakes. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. The black sedan followed. Got you. I was out of the car in a flash, moving through the darkness toward them. By the time the driver realized what was happening, I was already ripping open the door. What the... An elbow to the jaw sent him snapping back, his head smacking against the pillar. The passenger fumbled for his gun, but I was already on him, grabbing his arm and twisting it at a sickening angle. Ah! I yanked his seatbelt loose and dragged him out through the shattered window. His scream cut short when my knee slammed into his gut. The driver came to, reaching for his weapon. I didn't give him the chance. I snatched the knife from the fallen thug's belt and drove it deep into the driver's throat, twisting viciously. A fountain of blood sprayed across the dashboard. The second guy was still writhing on the ground, gasping for breath. I crouched beside him, gripping his hair, forcing him to look at me. "Who sent you?" He stayed silent, but his eyes betrayed him. I pressed the blade against his cheek, drawing a thin, burning line. "Henry. It was Henry." He choked out. "Of course it was." I smirked and slit his throat. His phone vibrated in his pocket. I grabbed it, answered without looking at the screen. "Hello," I said, my voice cold. Henry's smug voice came through. "David, I hope you're our Henry." I cut him off, gripping the phone tight. "If you send one more of your men to follow me, you'll have to find yourself a new hitman." Silence. "You're not in a position to threaten me." "You're right." I nodded, even though he couldn't see. "But you know I'll do this clean. No witnesses. No noise. If your men get in my way, that'll be a problem. For you." Henry exhaled slowly. I could tell he was thinking. "Fine," he finally said. "Just don't take too long, David. Don't drag your feet either," I muttered and ended the call. Now I was working alone, and Morello wouldn't live to see the morning. I moved through the darkness like a shadow. Morello's estate was on the outskirts of the Sitya luxurious mansion, surrounded by high walls and crawling with cameras. For an average man, an impenetrable fortress. For me, just another job. I had studied the layout before. The guards patrolled in shifts, swapping out every 30 minutes. Their cameras? They covered the obvious spots, but I knew where to slip through. The fence cleared in one leap. The guard at the back door a silent blade through the throat. I caught his body before it hit the ground. Then, the corridors. My eyes flicked over the doors. My steps were light, silent. To my right, two men, deep in conversation, completely unaware. One step forward, a hand clamped on his shoulder. The second man didn't even get to gasp before his head cracked against the wall. I climbed higher, bypassing the cameras, leaving no trace. The final hallway I turned, past the bedrooms, straight to the library. That was where Morello spent his nights, counting his bloodstained money. I entered the room and lowered myself into the armchair by the window, swirling a glass of expensive whiskey in my hand. Now, I waited. The door opened within minutes. Vic Morello walked in, a tall man with dark hair and a square jaw. He was chewing on a toothpick, searching his pockets for something. But when he lifted his head, he froze. I watched his face turn ashen. "Have a seat, Vic," I said smoothly, turning the whiskey in my hand. He didn't move. His eyes narrowed, his fingers curled into fists. "Who the hell are you?" I smiled. "I'm the man who was sent to kill you." Morello didn't move, but his breathing grew heavier. "Henry sent me," I continued. "He thinks you're interfering with his business. But you know what, Vic? I don't give a damn." I took a sip of whiskey. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." Morello blinked. "What do you want?" "Men and weapons." I set the glass down on the table. "I'll help you take Henry out." He smirked, but the smile quickly faded. "And why should I trust you?" I slowly stood up and stepped closer. "Because if I wanted you dead, you'd already be a corpse." Morello studied me, squinting slightly, as if scanning every inch of me. I knew he wasn't the trusting type, especially not toward a man who had walked in offering a deal after coming to kill him. But he wasn't a fool either. "Men and weapons, huh?" He finally spoke. I nodded. Morello tapped his fingers thoughtfully against the table, then reached for the phone, dialed a short number, and said, "Gino, come in." The door opened, and a man with a predatory face stepped inside, dressed in a black turtleneck. His movements were precise, effortless, clearly a professional. "Yeah, boss." "David," Morello turned to me. "This is Gino. He'll be your guide into our little army. Anything you need, men, guns, intel's your guy." I nodded at Gino. He only snorted, keeping a firm, assessing gaze locked on me. "I see you and Henry already have history. If you came to me," Morello smirked, "means that bastard's gotten too cocky." "Not just cocky," I clenched my fists. "He took my daughter." A shadow flickered across Morello's face. "Family is sacred," he said, and there wasn't a hint of deception in his voice. "Henry went too far." "Well then, in that case, we'll burn his damn empire to the ground." 2 hours later, I was in a warehouse on the city outskirts, standing in front of a table stacked with weapons. Gino gave me a scrutinizing look and gestured at the selection. Pick your gear. We need to do this fast and quiet. Henry isn't stupid's expecting trouble, but he doesn't know where it'll hit from. I picked up a suppressor and attached it to my Beretta, then tested the balance of a knife perfectly weighted, honed so sharp it could slice through a tendon like paper. And the men? I asked. 15 fighters. Solid guys, Gino replied. They're ready. I nodded. We need to get to Henry before he even realizes he's lost. Gino smirked. We've got a way. He unrolled a schematic of Henry's compound across the table. Here's his warehouse. And this is the house where he's keeping your daughter. Plenty of guards, but they're all focused on the main entrance and the perimeter. If we distract them with an explosion or a diversionary attack, we can slip in through the back. I nodded. Then we blow up his warehouse. Gino grinned. I like the way you think. I looked at the weapons, at the map, at the men standing around. No, I had an army. Henry wouldn't live to see the sunrise. The night smelled of smoke, gunpowder, and death. We arrived soundless like several cars, headlights off, black silhouettes blending into the shadows. I crouched in the bushes, scanning Henry's compound through thermal optics. There were plenty of guards. Henry was expecting trouble, but he didn't know trouble was already here. I handed Gino a radio. Started. He nodded and gave a quick signal to one of his men. 10 seconds later, an explosion ripped through the night sky. The warehouse erupted into flames, fire licking high into the air. The night filled with panicked shouts and the sharp cracks of ammunition cooking off in the heat. Move in. I slid from the cover, a silenced pistol in one hand, a knife in the other. The first guard ran straight into me, barely registering my presence before my blade punched under his chin, slicing through flesh and bone. His eyes rolled back, and I eased his body to the ground. Beside him, another had just enough time to react, raising his rifle too late. My bullet tore through his throat. He collapsed to his knees, gurgling, fingers clawing at the open wound as he drowned in his own blood. I stepped forward and kicked him in the face, snapping his nose. Behind me, Gino and his men worked just as efficiently. One of them buried a knife in a guard's liver, twisting it slowly until the man sagged lifelessly. Another seized an enemy by the skull and snapped his neck with a brutal wrench, the crunch of vertebrae like a dry branch breaking. We moved fast, leaving only corpses in our wake. I entered the building first. In the hallway, 2 guards were whispering, trying to make sense of the chaos outside. What the F? I shot one in the eye, the second bullet blowing through his temple. He collapsed. The other guard fumbled for his radio. We're under ATT. I grabbed him by the throat, slamming him into the wall, and drove my knife into his side, right between the ribs. He let out a strangled whimper, limbs twitching. I twisted the blade, tearing through flesh. Where's the girl? I hissed into his paling face. 3rd floor, locked room, he rasped. I ripped the knife free, letting his body slump to the floor. We climbed higher, leaving bodies behind. 1 room, 4 guards, already armed, ready to fight. I lunged, dodging bullets slicing the air around me. Gino shifted left, firing a single clean shot that blew a man's jaw off. I ducked, vaulted over a couch, and sank my knife into a guard's throat. He gurgled, drowning in his own blood. Another charged at me with a blade. I caught his wrist, yanked it down, snapping the joint, and shoved my pistol into his mouth. This is for Emily, you piece of shit. I exhaled and pulled the trigger. His brain painted the walls. One left was scrambling to reload a shotgun in blind panic. I threw my knife, embedding it deep in his eye socket. His body convulsed and hit the ground. Clear, Gino whispered. I nodded and moved forward. Beyond the next door, Henry was waiting, and he already knew we were here. I kicked the door open with a powerful strike. Wood splintered into shards, and I stepped inside, my gun raised to chest level. In the center of the dimly lit room stood Henry. In one hand, he held a pistol, its barrel pressed tightly against my daughter's temple. Emily. She was tied to a chair, her eyes red from crying, a fresh bruise marking her cheek. But there was no fear in her gaze. She knew I had come for her. You just made a huge fucking mistake, David. Henry roared, pressing the gun harder against Emily's head. You're not walking out of here alive. I aimed straight at his face, my Beretta steady in my grip. Henry, my voice was cold as steel, you've already lost. He scoffed, his eyes darting around the room, desperately searching for an escape. You think you've won, huh? His hand twitched on the gun. My reinforcements are on the way. In 1 minute, my men will storm in here, and you'll be nothing but a corpse on the floor. I tilted my head slightly. Henry, no one is coming. He froze. What? I smiled and took a step forward. They're all dead. You're the last one left." His face turned pale. The veins on his neck bulged, his fingers clenched tightly around the grip of his gun. "You're lying, you son of a bitch." I took another step. "Want to check? Go ahead, pick up your phone, call your men. Listen for the ringing, if there even is any." Henry swallowed hard, but then made one last desperate move. "Back the fuck up, or I'll pull the trigger." I knew he was bluffing. He wouldn't kill Emily. She was his last bargaining chip. "You're already dead, Henry," I said calmly. "The only question is how much pain you'll feel before you pass out." He twitched again, his finger tightening on the trigger. Time slowed. I lunged. Henry fired. The gunshot echoed, but I was already on him. My daughter didn't get hit. Not a single bullet. Not a single scratch. I grabbed his wrist and twisted it violently. A sickening crack filled the air as Henry howled in agony, his gun clattering to the floor. I seized him by the throat, slamming him against the wall before shoving him into the middle of the room. He stumbled, collapsing to his knees. Emily was breathing heavily but didn't say a word. I cut the ropes, and she immediately threw her arms around my neck, clinging to me as if afraid I would disappear. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered, feeling her tremble. "I'm here." She nodded, refusing to let go. I lifted my gaze to Henry. He was crawling toward his fallen gun, his face twisted in a mixture of agony and hatred. I stepped forward and crushed his hand beneath my boot. The crunch of breaking bones echoed through the room. Henry let out a guttural scream, writhing on the floor. "I could kill you," I murmured, crouching beside him. "But that would be too easy." I pulled out my knife, turning it slowly in my hand before driving it deep into his thigh, twisting the blade. Henry roared in agony, his body arching from the sheer pain. I turned to Emily, placing my hands on her shoulders, looking into her terrified yet still defiant eyes. "Sweetheart, I need you to wait outside. Go to the next room." She shook her head, gripping my hands tighter. "Dad." "Emily," my voice was firm but calm. "I don't want you to see this." She hesitated, pressing her lips together, but then she nodded. I helped her up, led her to the door, and looked into her eyes. "I love you." She lingered for a second, then stepped out. The door closed. Now, it was just me and him. Henry coughed, trying to drag himself backward. His face was twisted in pain and terror. He understood. "David," his voice was hoarse, thick with panic. We can make a deal." I tilted my head, studying him like a rat squirming on the pavement. "A deal?" I stepped closer, grabbed him by the hair, and dragged him toward the table in the corner of the room. He groaned, his body convulsing from the pain, but I didn't care. On the table sat a portable gas burner, small, practical, left there for convenience. Beside it lay a metal fork. I ignited the burner. A blue flame flared to life, casting eerie shadows across the room. "You know, Henry," I said, tightening my grip on his throat, "I've spent a lot of time thinking about how you should die. Fast. Slow?" I picked up the fork, holding it by the wooden handle, and brought the tines close to the fire. "You screamed that I had made a mistake, that I wouldn't leave here alive. But look at you now." Henry thrashed, his eyes darting wildly. "David, please." I pressed the glowing hot fork against his cheek. A sickening sizzle filled the room as the smell of burning flesh spread through the air. Henry howled, his body jerking violently, but I held him in place. "And this is just the beginning," I whispered into his ear. I tossed the fork aside, seized his arms, and in one swift motion, forced his face into the fire. His scream tore through the night. His skin blistered, his hair ignited, and he thrashed violently in my grip, but I held him there until his own screams choked him. When I finally pulled him back, his face was no longer a face. Raw, charred muscle, the skull beneath showing through scorched flesh. Henry wheezed, gulping for air in ragged, uneven breaths. I drew my gun and pressed the barrel against his head. "This is for my daughter, you piece of shit." The shot was muffled. Blood sprayed across the walls, and Henry's body twitched one last time. I turned away, wiped my hands on his expensive jacket, and headed for the door. When I stepped outside, Emily was waiting. I took her hand. "Dad?" "It's over, sweetheart." And we left, leaving behind only smoke, the stench of death, and the corpse of a man who would never hurt anyone again. We stepped out of the building, and the moment I breathed in the night air, I knew something was wrong. Too quiet. I scanned the area, gripping Emily's hand. The night still carried the scent of burning, but now there was something else in the air: tension. A shadow flickered behind the car. Shit. I loosened my grip and handed Emily a pistol. "Take this, sweetheart. If anything happens, shoot." She nodded, fingers tightening around the grip. Then, A voice rang out. "There you are, David." I looked up. 5 men stood before me. 3 armed with rifles, 2 with knives. Pathetic. Morello had scent cleaners. The first one stepped forward with a smirk. "The boss wanted me to tell you that you did a fine job. Henry's dead, but you're no longer needed." I exhaled, shaking my head. "Idiots." "What?" I moved before he could blink. An elbow to the throat sent the closest one choking, his rifle slipping from his grasp. I grabbed him by the collar, spun him around, and shoved him into the line of fire from his own men. Bullets ripped through his back, splattering my face with blood. "That's one down," I smirked. The second lunged at me with a knife. I caught his wrist, twisted hard, and drove his own blade deep into his thigh. He screamed, but I wrenched it free and buried it in his throat. "That's 2. The last 3 hesitated, eyes darting between me and the bodies. "Fucking kill him already." They opened fire, but I was already gone, rolling behind a car. "Hiding," one of them yelled. I peeked out, threw my knife. It sank straight into his eye. He spasmed and collapsed, limbs twitching. "No, just waiting for you to look even dumber than you already do." The remaining 2 paled. Shit. They moved, but I was already behind them. One took a bullet to the back of the head. The last man dropped his weapon and raised his hands. "Please, no." I sighed, rolling my eyes. "You're serious? You just tried to kill me, and now you're begging?" He panicked. "It was an order. I was just following." I picked up his rifle, ejected the magazine, checked the rounds. "You know what's funny?" What?" I slid the magazine back in, chambered around. "This is your last job." I pulled the trigger. The bullet punched through his skull, splattering his brains against the wall. I let out a breath and turned to Emily. She stood still, unfazed. "Time to go, sweetheart," I said, tucking the gun away. "You meant they made a mistake, didn't you?" she asked calmly. I smirked, stepping over the bodies. "Yeah, kid. A big one." I pulled up to Morello's mansion, feeling that familiar, almost satisfying heat of anger rising inside me. That bastard really thought he could take me out? Nice try. 2 guards stood at the entrance, but the moment I stepped out of the car, their faces fell. They knew. I was supposed to be dead. "Tell Morello that David is here," I said, walking past them without a second glance. They didn't even try to stop me. I moved through the lavish corridors, pushed open the doors to his office. Morello sat behind his desk, lazily sipping whiskey. But the moment he saw me, his smirk vanished. "David," he said slowly, setting down his glass. "Morello, you're a fucking idiot." He blinked, then quickly regained his composure. "David, I don't know what your..." I stepped forward and placed a bloodied knife on his desk. "Oh, don't pretend, Vic. Your men were waiting for me outside. Now they're waiting for burial." He frowned, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "Shit." "Yeah, shit." I leaned over his desk, locking eyes with him. "You gave the order to take me out. That was your biggest mistake." He steadied himself, leaning back in his chair with a sigh. "David, understand. It was just business." I tilted my head, pretending to think. "Business? Let's talk about business then. You hired me, I did the job. Then you tried to kill me, but you failed. What does that tell you?" He stayed silent. I drew my gun and leveled it at his face. "It tells me you're already dead." His fingers tensed on the armrests, but he didn't move. "David, wait. For what? Another one of your betrayals?" "No. For a proposal." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of proposal, Morello? You've got 10 seconds before I turn you into a rug with extra ventilation." He swallowed, reached for his glass, but didn't drink. "You survived. You killed Henry, wiped out my men, and now you're here. You're a demon, David. And I need a demon working for me." I smirked. "Oh, now you need me?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Work for me. Big money, power, resources." I said nothing. Slowly, Morello reached toward his desk drawer. I fired. The bullet tore through the wood, and Vic yelped, clutching his now bloodied arm. "Fuck, David. Don't reach for a gun when you're trying to make a deal." "Vic," I smirked. "Bad manners." His breathing was ragged, his eyes darting around the room. "So," I tilted my head, "maybe I should just kill you and take everything for myself?" Morello gritted his teeth. "Or, I could be useful." I studied him as he writhed in pain. Work for him? Not a chance. I watched him clutch his bleeding arm to his chest, his breathing ragged, sweat glistening on his forehead. He knew. He already understood how this would end. "David," he rasped, trying to push himself upright in his chair. "Let's talk." I smirked. "Oh, we're talking, Vic. This is just your last conversation." He swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. But there wasn't one. I stepped closer, grabbed his whiskey, and took a sip. "Good taste," I murmured, setting the glass back down. "Shame you won't be enjoying it anymore." I pulled out my knife and placed it carefully in front of him. "You have two choices, Vic. First, I kill you quickly." He swallowed again. "And the second?" I smirked, nudging the knife closer. "The second, you do it yourself. Show me you've got even a shred of dignity left." He shook his head violently, clutching his wounded arm. You can't." I aimed and shot him in the knee. Morello howled, his body convulsing from the pain, and I simply waited for his screams to die down. "Choose, Vic. I can make this slow and agonizing." His trembling hand reached for the knife, fingers wrapping around the handle. I could see his mind racing, but he knew there was no way out. He took a deep breath, pressed the blade to his throat, and stopped. His eyes met mine. "Go to hell, David." I smiled. "I've already been there. And you know what? I don't need you there." I drove the knife into him. Not in the heart. Not in the neck. I plunged the blade straight into his gut and slowly twisted, feeling his muscles tear around the steel. His eyes widened, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. I leaned in, whispering into his ear, "This is the end, Vic. Your games are over." I yanked the knife free, his blood spilling over my hands. Morello gasped, his body tilting to the side. I put a bullet in his head before his agony could drag on. His body hit the floor with a dull thud. I wiped the blade on his expensive suit, took another sip of whiskey, and turned away. It was finally over. I came home in the dead of night. The apartment was silent. Too silent. I knew Samantha was still here. She wouldn't have left. She had nowhere to go. I walked slowly into the living room. She sat on the couch, barefoot, in a wrinkled silk nightgown, a glass of wine in her hand. Her hair was messy, her face pale, makeup smeared. She didn't even look up when I entered. "You're alive," she muttered, taking a sip. I didn't answer. I just sat in the chair across from her and stared. "So Henry's dead?" She smirked, but there was no joy in her voice. I gave a faint smile. "Very." She exhaled, running her fingers through her hair. "You came to kill me, didn't you?" Her voice was flat, almost calm. I shook my head. "No, Samantha. Death would be too easy for you." She frowned, but I was already heading toward the bedroom. "Where are you going?" Her voice carried a wary edge. "To pack your things." I heard her set the glass down on the table, her footsteps following after me. "What?" I opened the closet, pulling out her clothes and tossing them into a suitcase. "You're leaving." "Where?" I turned to her, meeting her wide, frantic eyes. "I don't care." She paled. "David." "No, Samantha." I raised a hand, silencing her. "You're not part of this family anymore." She blinked, as if struggling to comprehend. "You can't just throw me out. This is my home." I smirked. "Yours?" I stepped closer, leaning down to her level. "You traded your family for booze and a cheap bastard who couldn't even protect himself. You let him lay a hand on Emily." Her lips quivered, but she said nothing. "You think I'll let you stay after that? Let you see Emily again?" She let out a shaky sob, grabbing my hand. "David." I pulled my hand free and stepped back. "Your suitcase is by the door. Take it and leave." She lifted her head, rage flashing in her eyes. "And if I don't?" I chuckled darkly. "Then you'll see what happens when I really lose my patience." We stood in thick silence. Then, breathing heavily, she grabbed the suitcase and stormed toward the door. "You'll regret this," she screamed before disappearing into the night. I watched her go and shut the door. The draft carried the scent of wine and cheap perfume. I opened a window, letting in fresh air. The house was finally clean. 6 months passed. I sat on the terrace of my new home, sipping coffee, watching Emily play on the beach. The wind tangled her hair as she laughed, tossing pebbles into the waves. Her laughter, it was light, free. We left that city as soon as I closed the chapter on my old life. There was no reason to stay. I sold the house, packed up, and vanished like a ghost, leaving behind nothing but a trail of corpses and one broken woman. Samantha. I heard about her. A friend sent me updates sometimes, though I didn't care. She spiraled fast. Without me and Henry, she had no money, no friends. She clung to whatever she could, slept with whoever would have her, burned through her last scraps of cash in bars until she drank herself into oblivion. Someone spotted her at a rundown motel, throwing a drunken fit when they refused to serve her on credit. She even got arrested a couple of times for petty theft. She used to be beautiful, now just a relic of the past, something that no longer mattered. I felt no pity, no satisfaction. Just a simple fact, she got what she deserved. But I never looked back. I built a new life. And in that life, there was Lily. I met her by chance in a bookstore. Emily had been browsing the fantasy section while I struggled to remember which school book she needed. "Excuse me, do you need help?" I turned. She stood before me, holding a couple of books. Tall, slender, with long blonde hair tied into a loose ponytail. Eyes the color of honeyed whiskey. I smirked. "Unless you know which textbooks 8th graders need in this city, I'm afraid so." She smiled. "Oh, so you have a daughter?" "Emily," I nodded toward the shelves, where my girl was already engrossed in another novel. Lily tilted her head. "She's adorable." I studied her. "Do you work here?" "No," she laughed. "Just love books. But I know the school curriculum. I'm a teacher." I raised a brow. "A teacher?" She nodded, handing me the right book. "Looks like you just found yourself a consultant." She smiled. "Perhaps. With Lily, everything was easy. No drama, no pretense." She didn't ask unnecessary questions, and I didn't rush to share my past. She simply became part of our lives gently, naturally. We walked along the beach in the evenings. She read to Emily, and later we sat on the terrace, drinking wine, listening to the ocean. I started to feel the taste of life again. I pulled myself from my thoughts and looked toward the shore. Emily was chattering excitedly to Lily, who laughed, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. I took another sip of coffee and smiled. I wasn't a perfect man. But damn, for the first time in a long time I was happy.